Good morning. It's July 22nd, 2022. All those number twos again. Not much into numerology and all that sort of stuff, but if there's got to be somewhere, somehow, somebody says that that's supposed to be lucky or unlucky or good or bad or something, it just looks neat on the scroll on my thing there. Makes it easier to remember what the date is right now, anyways. So I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standards Daily Live Show. We run 11:30 until about 1 o'clock for those who are on for the first time. I usually have a couple of good guests on, do some political ranting, and have some discourse with you guys in the comment scroll. So good to see you guys in there. And just that reminder to everybody, use the comments. I love it. I like to see some interaction. I like to see where you're coming in from. I appreciate comments and questions. It helps me get rolling those times when guests stand me up now and then when we're being live. And it just keeps things unpredictable and interesting. But again, try to keep it civil. We don't always have to be nothing but sweethearts. This show would be pretty boring if I was nothing but sunshine and lollipops. But we can still stay somewhat respectful and civil. All right, as if folks are logging on, and I see you all coming in there, Mavis and Randy, Cindy, Deb, Dana, piling into the viewer scroll. It's great to see. Let's take some time to look at the daily observations. Today's a nice lazy one coming into the weekend. It's summer. It's hot for most areas. It's National Hammock Day. So this is the day to get out, set it up, tie it to a pair of trees or fence posts or whatever you have in your area, and get out there and lay back with a drink and be lazy for a bit, swinging in the wind. To be honest, I've never been big on hammocks. I had trouble getting in and out of those things. I many years ago, back when I used to still drink, I remember at one place where I was renting, and the roommate had a hammock, and I got too many beers, and it was too hard to get in and out of when you got to go to the bathroom and get more beer all the time. Either way, for those who love them, today's the day for it. It's also Rat Catchers Day. This one's kind of important, and as you can see from that picture that Nico's pulled up there, it's been a long celebrated day, of course. It was an important role in society. I mean, the rats did spread the bubonic plague. They are nasty, disgusting creatures. And being in Alberta, we are I think just about some of the only people on the whole planet that have such a large region. We're actually rat-free. We get the odd outbreaks, but we actually maintain and manage our rats. We have what's called a rat patrol. They go out. If there's reports of rats, they rush out and exterminate those things fast. Those are the modern day rat catchers. And hey, rats do a lot of damage. We just got to get rid of the liberal ones and we're good all around. But it is the day to celebrate those rat catchers. So go out and get your Happy Rat Catchers Day card or make your Happy Rat Catchers Day cake and eat it while you're swinging in that hammock. Let's see. Okay. I got Franco Terrazzano coming on from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He comes on a lot. That's because he's a good guest. He talks about a lot of good things. And of course, there's always lots of taxation things to talk about. Rarely good, unfortunately, but we'll have a discussion with him today to cap off the week. And then Western Standard columnist Dave Makichuk. Last time I talked to him, he was smoking a cigar and having a drink at a table in Paris while he was out at an arms show. He's back in Canada now, but he's been writing and talking on a lot of issues. And we're going to discuss some of his columns and things he's been speaking of. I should have a live check-in as well from a guy named Phil Davies with Talk TV in the UK. And we're going to get a bit of an update on what's going on with their heat wave and some of the damage and things that have been happening out that way. So, yes, we will have a packed show. Okay, so I'll start with the thing that's got me going today, though, of course. And I'm watching politics. That's what I do. And staying the course, so I'm going to talk about the UCP race. Staying the course just won't cut it. 6 out of 7 of the candidates, now that are registered vying for the leadership of the UCP are currently sitting MLAs, and it shows. Aside from Danielle Smith, the rest just seem to keep uttering the same old talking points when it comes to dealing with Ottawa. The federal government's been attacking Alberta for years, and the provincial government hasn't reacted with much more than threats and musings. Court challenges are nice, but they invariably fail once they reach the federally appointed level of the courts. Referendums express our feelings, but they need to follow through with something with teeth. The silence from Kenny after the last fall's equalization referendum was deafening. The Fair Deal panel traveled to Alberta ostensibly to get feedback from citizens and propose ways to head off federal incursions into provincial jurisdiction. The panel issued a number of solid conclusions. Citizens said what they wanted. The government spent, though, years talking about the conclusions and not really beginning the process of implementing any of them. Where's the provincial police force? Oh, we're talking about it. What about the provincial pension plan? We're talking about it. How about an Alberta parole board? We aren't even talking about that one. Okay, how about the demands to reform unemployment insurance? You see, the list gets longer and longer. It was bait and switch. Aside from appointing a chief firearms officer, and hey, good on him, that was a good call, the government really hasn't done anything more with the Fair Deal panel recommendations than to talk about it. Talk is cheap, and Albertans are sick of it. Trudeau is making plans for emission controls targeting Western energy producers that are going to castrate the industry if they're imposed. Fertilizer is also the next target the ideological liberals have in their sights. Their proposed attack on that will crush agricultural producers and consumers alike. It's hardly coincidence that Western industries are the focus of federal government attacks. It allows them to virtue signal to the world about what they're doing, and they know the provincial government will do nothing more than stomp their feet in a rage and talk and talk and talk and talk. Danielle Smith came out of the race, out of the gates into the race hard and fast. Her proposed Sovereignty Act takes the battle to Ottawa. She wants to play an offensive game with the federal government rather than the defensive one we've been doing. Her tactic appears to be working, as she's already sprung from being what was once considered not too long ago a spent force in politics to the presumed front runner in a race to become the next premier. Smith's identified where the UCP lost the faith of their membership, and she's making proposals to fill that hole. The establishment candidates first appeared to be in shock. At first, they let Smith lead every headline and own the discourse while they continued to issue mushy middle talking points on issues. I've interviewed nearly every candidate for the leadership now, and aside from Smith, they sound nearly indistinguishable from each other. Now, the establishment candidates are finally starting to realize they may have let the race get away from themselves. Instead of looking at their own shortcomings and platforms, they're shooting outward at Smith. They're trying to tear down the front runner rather than raise up their own support. And this tactic is bad for the party, it's bad for the province, and it's not good for their campaigns. The establishment's saying the Sovereignty Act is not realistic and couldn't work. Okay, fair enough. What will work, though? We know from experience that just talking about the issues doesn't solve them. That's why Kenny is heading for retirement rather than preparing for the next election. The candidates need to come up with some concrete policies and actions to counter Ottawa, and they need to be convincing in their will to do it. The UCP members already heard it all before from Kenny, and it's made them cynical when they hear establishment candidates making the same promises. Sorry, guys, you had 3 years to work on this. The campaigns trailing Smith and the UCP leadership need to look within. Start creating some unique ideas and approaches. Deliver pitches for those ideas. Tired old talking points are just going to fall on deaf ears now. A person tweeted me this morning, I would rather take the wrong action than none. That may not be the most advisable path, but it illustrates how a lot of members are feeling on this issue right now. They don't want to see the provincial government sitting on their hands with Ottawa anymore. They will support whoever presents them with a concrete plan, whether it's viable or not. Doing nothing isn't an acceptable course anymore. Will the contenders for the UCP throw and figure this out before Smith runs away with it? I guess time will tell. But right now, they've got to figure out what they're doing. Okay, that's what's got me wound up this morning as I watched the politics unfolding. Like I said, it's not an endorsement for Smith. It's a kick in the butt for the ones running against her. Guys, you got to do better. Just shooting at her isn't enough, or she's going to win this hands down. So think a little harder, guys. All right, let's bring in our news editor, Dave Naylor, and see what else is happening out there. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Oh, thank God it's Friday, Cory. Thank God.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a week.
You and Jane got any plans for the weekend?
What was it? Jane's teaching another one of her courses on Sunday, and tomorrow I don't see anything in the schedule, so I'm sure Jane's got a bunch of stuff she wants me to do.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll all be waiting for you when you get back.
Oh, of course.
We've got a crazy busy news morning going, Cory. Just published a story working its way through the internet now on another Hockey Canada scandal involving a junior team. As you know, there's a sex attack being investigated at the moment from the 2018 team. Apparently somebody's come forward to claim they were assaulted by a group of players in the 2013 tournament that was held in Halifax. So that file is now being handed to the Halifax Police Department, and they're launching an investigation. So could be another black eye for Hockey Canada. There's a massive manhunt under the way in Chilliwack, BC at the moment. 2 women shot and killed yesterday morning, allegedly by a man who was supposed to be in court at that very moment facing domestic dispute charges. So it looks like a very nasty sort of domestic that's gone bad there. So apparently the shooting happened in front of children too. So that's not good. And this gentleman, we'll call him, is on the loose. More fallout on the Conservatives' decision to hold a third official debate. As you know, yesterday, Pierre Poilievre has announced that he's not going to attend, and Leslyn Lewis is today musing about the fact, she really is too busy, and she's not sure what this new debate will really accomplish. So she may look at pulling out. And our David Creighton's got a take on it as to why Poilievre is doing this. He's certainly the best orator amongst everybody there, and normally if you see him in the House of Commons, he's tearing the Liberals to shreds. So, but as a front runner, you don't want to make a mistake. Disney has announced that they're going to remove all references to fairy godmothers. Another woke choice coming at us in this new world. And CBC story of the day, it turns out 143 CBC executives made $15 million in bonuses. So I think after the show, Cory, if you could write me a letter of reference, I think it might be time to apply over there. Get into the trough of taxpayer dough.
I can see the temptation. I'm not sure if my letter of reference would actually aid you into getting into the CBC, though. But
yeah, good point. Good point.
I can understand why you'd want to get in. It's funny with that Disney thing, though. So I wonder, that there's three words there that I can see the woke getting upset with, depending on the context. I mean, there's fairy, there's God, and there's mother, all three of which the hyper woke can have challenges with. I wonder if it's one or all of those things that they've got the problem with.
Oh, I'm sure it's all three of them, Cory. Doesn't take much for them to be set off. And also breaking at the moment, Cory, is our male residents working on a story on a court ruling involving Calgary pastor Arthur Pawlowski. And it looks like a senior justice in the Alberta Court of Appeal has thrown out all the charges and fines related to his COVID protests. So keep an eye out for that on the site as soon as Mel can put it together.
Great. Well, I imagine we'll be seeing Pastor Art out and doing what he does best very soon now that he's cleared of everything.
Indeed.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for the update. I guess I'll let you get back to getting that content together. I should pass along on here. You gave me a bunch of treats for Duke the Wonder Dog and Volstagg the Brat and Livy the Bulldog, and they all send their drooliest appreciation for your having done so. So,
that's courtesy of my mother visiting from British Columbia. She loves Duke the Wonder Dog and thought she'd bring him some special treats. So I'm sure she'll be glad that they enjoy it.
She's making friends out in the East. All right. Thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you after the show.
See you, Cory.
So that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And yes, not some news breaking, as Jim Marie saying, yeah, the news, Melanie's just working on writing that right now with Arthur Pawlowski. Other things all over. I mean, some of the news is a bit crazy, as we say, with Disney dumping the other stuff contemporary, what's going on in the federal conservative race. So we have been writing all across the country on these things, and this is what I like to remind you, the reason we have this, the reason we can do this is because you guys have taken open actions with us, and we really appreciate it. Thousands of people have signed up, subscriptions. We are not taking tax dollars. I love that point of pride. It's so nice to get in here. I mean, hey, we're not getting rich by any means, but we're doing well because you guys have stepped up. I like to think we're obviously providing some content that you want to see as through the subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your subscriptions. And if you haven't already, guys, it looks like having some really bad internet problems right now. Hopefully that clears up very soon. It's not just you guys. It's not just you, Bridget. It's everybody. Yeah, I know. I heard from all your commenters, and I'm hoping right away. For the time being, I'll just kind of talk and hope that Shaw suddenly gets us internet again. This is very problematic. It's yeah. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do at this point. I know none of you can see me, and I know I'm breaking up. I'm sorry for that. Our internet has gone to crap all of a sudden. I know in pictures. So I'll just kind of keep randomly talking into the air here and hoping we may recover some internet at some point. Usually it only happens for seconds, but right now it seems to be a little extended. I don't know what we can do about this. I can't reboot or we will lose our broadcast. I know the audio is terrible, everybody, and hopefully this kicks up really, really soon. My producer, of course, is working remotely today. So, I see another bar. I think we're getting a little better. There we are. For you guys who've been hanging in there, thank you very much. For whatever reason, the internet gods had told us that I'm not to broadcast for a minute or so there, and it seems to have recovered. Let's hope it doesn't do it again. Man, that's frustrating. I tell you, I know it was painful for you guys to sit there and listen to me all broken up and everything, but it's frustrating for me to stare at this camera and just kind of babble incoherently for a few minutes, praying that the internet's going to improve. I guess my prayers were answered, and that's not bad for a non-religious guy like myself. So thanks for hanging in there, guys. Sorry about that. It's beyond our control. We pay for good service, but you don't always get it. All right. Speaking now, let's look at a few more of these news things here. This one got me going, and we've seen a lot of that on Twitter. CTV News put out this tweet, and it was like in hushed tones, and they're saying temperatures are expected to reach or surpass 30 degrees Celsius in parts of Canada in coming days. This was a news story. This was a headline. This was the top. This is what they stick out on Twitter. So what? It's July. It gets above 30 for a few days every July. It's done that for the last few hundred years. The fear-mongering from the legacy media just gets so sickening and tiresome. They keep acting like every heat wave is the first heat wave we've ever endured. Look at the weather patterns from the dirty 30s. Look at the drought. Look at the heat. They just feed this climate change narrative. But why? Because they're suckling on the taxpayers' teat. Trudeau wants a climate change narrative. Thus, his pet media members will make sure to push it. They also push every bit of fear-mongering they can for the COVID, for monkeypox now. How many monkeypox stories are we going to see from CTV, CBC, Global, and all the rest of those used-up legacy media outlets? Monkeypox. Guess what the death count is? Freaking zero. Zero. How many news stories have there been? Hundreds? Like, really? What's going on? Well, that's our legacy media for us, guys. So monkeypox is going to make the mainstream media, even though more people are literally dying of lightning strikes, than monkeypox, but we don't report on that every day, or dying falling into swimming pools, or all sorts of ways we pass along. Monkeypox is nothing. It's a weird disease that's going around through a select group of people, and it's unfortunate, and let's hope that it goes to the wayside. But in the meantime, it's not the plague. So I don't care if the World Health Organization wants to call it an emergency. I don't care if CTV wants to call it one. Let's get real, guys. But this crap, acting as if 30-degree weather is something crazy in Canada. It's not. It's 86 degrees Fahrenheit for the older among us, where it makes more sense. Warm, but not beyond the pale and not unusual. And of course, everybody talks about every forest fire as if it's the first one that ever happened. Sorry, guys, they've been happening since the beginning of forests. And they're going to continue to, as long as we don't properly manage our forests and areas and allow deadwood to pile up, and we don't do controlled burns and proper management of our timberland. So, it just doesn't stop. But I never like, passing up on the opportunity to slap at our legacy media members. And before I get to my next guest, let's see. I'll talk about one other thing that kind of caught my eye. This Jonathan Kay was pointing out, I believe, and this is from the Government of Canada's glossary in the Immigration Department. And it shows a bunch of terms and how to define them and everything. And it gets down to what white people are. This is the identity politics that's dividing us, and the insanity and the ridiculousness. This is what's given to new immigrants, or at least this is what they're told to read when they're coming into Canada. White people are defined as belonging to any of the various peoples with light-colored skin, usually of European origin. Very good. Okay, so it's getting beyond the simple definition in the front of the crayon box. The term has become an indicator less of skin color, though, and more of unquestioning acceptance of the legacies and ongoing practices of white supremacy and colonialism. Oh my God. So this is a government site basically saying you're automatically, that being white means an unquestioning acceptance of legacies of white supremacy and colonialism. This is our government. We're spending our dollars to have this hate, and that's hate. I'm not going to use that word right now. That's hate from our friggin' federal government. Not only that, they say not even an indicator of skin color, so that way they can apply it to, well, that guy's not white, but we can call him white because he's apparently accepting legacies of white supremacy and colonialism. And this is the stuff they're giving new immigrants. This is what they come into this country and they read. This is the government, and here's your handout. Watch out for those white folks. You wonder why we have racial division. You wonder why we get these problems. This friggin' government's feeding it. They're pouring bacteria into a festering sore. God, and I get to spend my money to feed that. All right. So, speaking of feeding the government and giving them tax dollars, let's bring Franco Terrazzano in for a voice of reason on things and see what's happening out there. Hey, Franco, good to see you.
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, always good to get you. Kind of what first caught my eye this week, though you've always got lots to cover and lots to say. Unfortunately, in some ways, you're like a firefighter. You kind of wish you didn't have to do your job, but it needs to be done there. And the government makes sure that you've got employment security because they're always wasting our tax dollars. But the big carbon tax rebate, they almost made celebratory. Look, everybody, you happy. Look at all the money coming back to you. Not quite the windfall for people in reality than that they like to make it out to be.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it turns out that the Trudeau government isn't exactly being honest with Canadians. Cory, I know you're shocked, but the Trudeau government is claiming that families are going to be made better off with its carbon tax and rebate scheme. But hold on a second, because the government's own independent watchdog, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, is showing that the federal government is using magic math. So the carbon tax this year will cost the average household anywhere from about $300 all the way to $670, even after accounting for the rebates. Again, that's according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer. So the Trudeau government is telling us one thing, and the government's own independent watchdog is saying, no, that's not true. The carbon tax will cost the average family hundreds of dollars, even with the rebate.
And best of all, of course, that we always talk about, how well has it worked on reducing emissions so far?
Yeah, not well at all. Not well at all. The carbon tax is not this low-cost environmental plan. The carbon tax is a high-cost tax plan. I mean, the Western Standard, let's talk about the most western province in Canada, British Columbia. It has had the highest carbon tax in the nation for years, and emissions continue to go up. Data on Trudeau's first year of the national carbon tax shows that emissions went up there. Okay, so there's two claims that the federal government is really misleading Canadians on. Number one is they're trying to sell Canadians that this is an environmental plan. Well, if you look at the data, it's pretty clear that it's not an environmental plan. It's a tax plan. The second misleading claim is that they're trying to make Canadians think that you're going to be better off with these rebates than you are paying the carbon tax. And of course, that's not the truth. The carbon tax, even with rebates, is costing those average households hundreds of dollars every year.
And this is a time when we can ill afford to be doing that. And of course, we got the other hidden and second carbon taxes that are going to keep slapping on and piling on with this. I mean, this isn't just a static thing. This is the sort of thing that keeps going up every year, right?
Well, okay, so there's a lot to break down there. So number one, you're right. The carbon tax is only going to get worse and worse because Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he'll keep cranking up his carbon tax to nearly 40 cents per liter by 2030. So this is what that means. It means that from now through 2030, the carbon tax and rebate will still cost an average household anywhere between $6,400 if you're living in Manitoba, all the way up to $13,000 if you're living in Alberta. And again, that's after accounting for the rebate, and that's the government's own independent watchdog's numbers. But Cory, you know what else this isn't considering? The second carbon tax. We just saw the regulations that the federal government released of its second carbon tax through fuel regulations that will be coming into effect next year. Now, here's what happens with the second carbon tax. If companies can't reduce the carbon content of their fuel, if they can't meet Trudeau's requirements, they have to pay a second carbon tax. But the government's own research shows that it's going to be consumers who get hammered from the second carbon tax. It could add up to 13 cents per liter extra by 2030. There's no rebates with the second carbon tax. And Cory, I know I'm going on, but one more point. The government knows exactly who the second carbon tax is really going to impact. If you read their own impact analysis, it shows that it's lower and middle income Canadians who are going to get the brunt of this. It's the single moms. It's the people who are already struggling with energy poverty. It's those seniors who are living on fixed incomes who the second carbon tax is really going to punish.
Well, that's it. I mean, you know, inflation alone is already beating on people in that situation. And they just get their unreasonable requests. Well, the single parent should just ride the bus. Oh, that's great to take the kids to school, to soccer practice, pick up your groceries, go across town, go to work, come back, pick up. It's not realistic, but it's funny. Our woke government likes to throw out the word privilege all the time,
Yeah.
but a lot of those ones bringing that down on everybody it's because they're in such a place of privilege. I don't think they understand the hardships they cause on working Canadians when they do this sort of thing.
Cory, I have to pick up right there. There's two things. Number one, I think we have to stop pretending like these high gas prices are an accident. They're not an accident. Every time the Trudeau Liberals are passing by a gas station, they must be patting themselves on the back, because these high gas prices are exactly what the Trudeau government has been pushing for with its carbon tax hikes, with its second carbon tax hikes, with its attacks on the energy industry that reduces supply, no more pipelines law, discriminatory tanker ban. Cory, I can go on and on and on. But one thing we have to talk about here is what you just said. It's the people who are inflicting this pain that seem to be shielded from the pain. And Cory, here's the perfect example. The Bank of Canada has one job: keep inflation around 2%. And what did we just find out? We just found out that the Bank of Canada has been busy handing out $45 million in bonuses and pay raises during the pandemic, when it obviously failed to keep inflation low.
Yeah, and I mean, it's been said by a lot. Like, we saw this coming. We were talking about this long ago. I mean, if the Bank of Canada was going to be responsible, they should have been starting to creep up then the prime interest rate 6-8 months ago, rather than suddenly coming in with a hammer at this point. And as you said, they're kind of patting themselves on the back now with bonuses for having dropped the ball.
Well, look, at best, the Bank of Canada failed to keep a lid on these rising prices. But at worst, it is actually driving the inflation by printing hundreds of billions of dollars out of thin air. I mean, the Bank of Canada had its money printer on overdrive during the pandemic. It's printed $300 billion out of thin air. And Cory, I mean, come on. Every layman even understands this, is that if you increase the supply of money, the value of each unit goes down, right? So come on, the Bank of Canada needs to do a better job. In fact, the deputy governor of the Bank of Canada admitted that they failed to hit their inflation target. So if you have one of the leaders in the Bank of Canada who's admitting that they failed to hit their inflation target, well, then why are they handing out pay raises and bonuses? I mean, it really doesn't make sense from the perspective of the Canadians whose money relies on the central bank to actually do their job right.
Yeah, but that goes to show kind of government versus private sector, right? Like, if I underperformed and I was sourcing columns that were poorly read and my show ratings were crap, and our advertisers are fleeing, I know that Derek, if he doesn't fire me, he's not going to be giving me any raises or bonuses. I mean, It just doesn't work that way. But in government, we have the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, the ones who want to come after our home equity. They all got bonuses, and CBC executives who came begging for a bailout during the pandemic, they're all getting bonuses. So, I mean, there's definitely two classes in this country, and it's between the private and public sectors.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Cory. I mean, it's really unfortunate to say this, but we have seen the tale of two pandemics. One pandemic was full of absolute pain by the private sector. So many people. I mean, I was in Calgary. You're in Calgary. How many friends and family members and neighbors do we have who took a pay cut, who may have lost their job, who may have lost their small business and the life savings with it? But then in government, there were no pay cuts. Where were the pay cuts in government? There weren't. There was pay raises. There was bonuses. There was overtime pay. There was all of this, right? And you're touching on an important point here. And that's that taxpayers are being forced to pay for poor performance. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, they have one objective: housing affordability. Okay, well, home prices went up by 13% in 2020. Home prices went up by another 21% in 2021. So then why do they hand out $60 million in bonuses and pay raises during those years? Let's look at the federal government. They handed out, $171 million in bonuses during the pandemic, but the departments failed to meet half of their own performance objectives. Cory, on top of that, the feds also handed out $1.6 billion in overtime pay since 2019. So we're spending buckets of cash hiring new bureaucrats, buckets of cash paying for overtime, bonuses, pay raises, and we can't even get the government to meet its own performance objectives.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of those material things we can see with government services, we're hearing about all the crisis that's going on. People can't get their passports renewed. As simple as renewing a government document that they've been doing since Confederation, we've had passports, and they still apparently can't figure out how to renew them. And we've got millions of people in immigration now on a backlog. Like, the government's spending more and more, and we're getting less and less.
Yeah, I can't believe we have to say this, Cory, but bonuses and pay raises are for when you do a good job. But like these departments, the Bank of Canada, the CMHC, they're not doing a good job. Why are they getting pay raises and bonuses? And if you just give bonuses away like you're giving away participation ribbons, is it really a bonus or is it just a slush fund? Right? But here's the thing. I mean, in the private sector, if you were to fumble the ball like the government is in many of these departments and crown corporations, you'd probably get shown the door. To your point, not be showing a huge bonus check. So, I mean, it's so frustrating from taxpayers' perspective. But Cory, who we should really be looking at here is our politicians in Ottawa. What are they doing? We pay them six figures to actually protect the public purse, if I could say that. But what are they doing? I haven't heard any members of parliament really make a stink about all these pay raises, all these bonuses. I mean, I've seen a few, but not many.
Well, that's it. I mean, we're seeing excuses coming hard and heavy for inflation. They like to keep pretending it's a global thing. We can't do anything about it. I mean, there's a little bit of degree. Okay, there's some things that are going to be beyond their control, but still there are things they can do to mitigate it. And as you said, the Bank of Canada pouring more and more money into the mix is doing that. But I mean, we aren't even hearing a whisper from the federal government of getting spending under control. So I can't see how this is going to change.
Well, Cory, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, yeah, you're right. Other countries are going to see massive inflation when other countries do crazy things like run unbelievable amount of deficits or have their money printing on overdrive as well. When other countries do that, surprise, surprise, they're going to get the same bad results. And look, yes, global prices or prices are going up around the globe, but Canada isn't exactly doing well. Okay, if you look at the International Monetary Fund, they track consumer price increases around the world. In 2021, only 3 of 35 industrialized countries had higher inflation than Canada. So Canada had what? Higher inflation than 31 other industrialized countries, according to data from the International Monetary Fund. So it's not like the Bank of Canada governor, Tiff Macklem, can just shrug off this inflation and say, oh, it's just a global phenomenon, because clearly Canada is not doing good. It's not like we're Hong Kong, which is 1.8% inflation. It's not like we're Japan, which is close to about 2.5% inflation. It's not even like we're Switzerland, which is close to 3.4% inflation. Canada just announced 8.1% inflation, which is the highest annual increase since 1983, Cory.
Yeah, I mean, if our currency starts losing value, and that's the reality of what inflation is, that's completely within the control of the government. I mean, if there's a loss of purchasing power because of internationally traded commodities like oil and gas, then yeah, there's only limited things they can do. But there are things within their control. And as you said, when you can point out exceptions with other countries that aren't suffering by this, their excuse starts to fall pretty hollow. I mean, just because 100 countries are doing a stupid thing doesn't mean it's not still a stupid thing.
$300 billion. What do you think happens when you print up $300 billion out of thin air, right? That's the problem. It's that you have the government that can print $300 billion out of thin air, but you can't just go around printing new farmland or printing new homes out of thin air. So you end up with the perfect storm for inflation, which is too many dollars chasing too few goods, right? We know that that's what happens when you print up a whole bunch of money and you just throw it into the economy. Now, that's exacerbated by the fact that we just went through 2 years of revolving government lockdowns, which mean that we just can't continue to create as many goods that money could buy during that time, right? So the perfect storm for inflation was created by Canadian governments. Are there many other factors that influence prices? Sure. But we can't let our government off the hook for this mess that they have, at least in part, created.
Well, I know you guys won't let them off the hook. And of course, I love hanging them on the hook whenever possible. But all the same, let's hope we see some positive change. I guess the start's to at least just keep pointing it out and driving it home to people that they got to tell their elected members to change their bloody behavior. So where can people find more information on what you guys are up to and what you're doing, Franco?
Well, you know what? I would recommend that all your listeners pick up the phone or send an email to your member of parliament and ask them what they've done during COVID-19 with their pay raises. Because all members of parliament have been busy giving themselves 3 pay raises during the pandemic. So I would love to encourage your audience maybe to give them an earful. But please, 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 please check us out at taxpayer.com. We've got petitions you can sign, and you can follow all of our work in the newsroom tab.
Right on. Well, thanks for the latest update. And, well, I'm sure you'll have nothing but a bunch of positive news the next time we get you on.
Yeah, don't hold me to that, Cory.
All right. Well, I'll let you go and get back to work there. Thanks, Franco, and I'll talk to you soon.
See you later.
So that is Franco Terrazzano, the National Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. As I said, he's a regular guest on here because he's got a lot of common sense and good stuff to say, so it never gets tiring hearing it. It gets tiring that we do have to keep saying the same thing over and over again. But again, if we give up, hey, we're not going to win. We got to keep pushing. So it's good to see others tuning in from all over, too. People are getting on the show. Lenny Dijon, is that out in Red Deer County by Penhold, and Brad getting on there, and Christy and some others. So I just like seeing that audience. Keep using that comment scroll, guys. Keep things active, and let's keep discussing these things and try and fix these problems in this world. I know easier said than done, but we got to start somewhere. And this is a story that kind of ties into what Franco was talking about, myself. So this is the CBC. I think Dave might have mentioned this in the update. They have 143 executive directors, 8 directors of finance, 9 directors of legal services, 26 directors of technology and infrastructure. This is from Access to Information requests. And then individual pay and benefits weren't disclosed for these, but one former executive said his annual bonus was $80,000. I won't disclose exactly what I make, but I assure you this guy makes considerably more in his bonus than I just make in my salary. That's just a bonus. And what are we getting for it? What sort of fine, irreplaceable services are we getting from the state broadcaster? What lifestyle hindrances would we have? How bad would things get if we didn't have the CBC anymore? None. This is not... the less government, the better, without doubt. But we also we got to get rid of this stuff we just don't need whatsoever. There's no place for the government in broadcast. None. It's long gone. Hey there, Christine in Saskatchewan. Good to see you spreading out there. Spread the word. I'll sidetrack for a moment and nag everybody. This is how we can beat the state broadcaster and the legacy media and the others. This is how we have programs and broadcasts like this. And it's good to see people coming in from all over. Share. Do all that stuff you hear on all these broadcasts when you do it all the time, but it is important. Make sure to follow, hit the little bell thing so that it gives you alerts when the shows and broadcasts are going to come on. I'm not the only one that does them. Melanie does some fantastic interviews that come out there. We do the pipeline. We have reporters reading stuff, and we can get past the CBC and CTV and all of these terrible remnants of this of legacy media that we just don't need anymore. And this is how we can beat them, through subscribers. And also, it's kind of a citizens activity. Make sure to share it. Let's bring these numbers up. Hey, the more viewer numbers we can get, the more sponsors we can get. And then again, we can keep expanding our content and our reach. And talking about the news stories that the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about. That's the main thing that we got to get onto. And I'm going to speak to one of our sponsors actually while I'm at it, because it's not just you guys who subscribe, who pay our bills, but we've got people who advertise with us that do so as well. And one of those longtime sponsors is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys, their name says what they are. If you're involved in shooting sports on any level of any kind, whether target shooter, collector, hunter, doesn't really matter what it is. As long as it's legal, you're not harming everybody. That's what all of us legal firearm owners already do. But you've got to get together. You've got to have an association. This is where you can network with other firearm owners. This is where you can get information and resources, whether it's videos on safe firearm use or links to events or news items that impact firearms. It's all there on the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. And then again, most important of all, they're getting together and they're pushing back against this government that's trying to take away your right and ability to own and enjoy firearms. It's wrong that this is an ideologically driven government. And of course, they just do not want you to have those individual rights. And if you don't stand up for yourself, you will lose them. You'll lose. This is one of the ways to stand up for yourself. Take out a membership with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. That way they can help keep lobbying on your behalf and you can stay up to date and you get resources in return. It's a well investment in yourself. Check them out, CSSA-CILA.org, or again, just Google them, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Blaine Cisna, is it? Saying, who watches anything on the CBC these days? Nobody that I know. Yeah, I know. I mean, very few people do watch that crap that's on there. The problem is we still have to pay for it. You know, if it's private, I mean, my problem with the CBC isn't even so much their hard, woke, crazed leftward slant. That's fine. They can have that because you can always change the channel. The problem I have is that we have to pay for it. If it's purely private market, I don't care if somebody wants to put out an outright actual communist channel. As long as I'm not paying for it, they can have whatever the hell they want. They can say whatever they want. But as soon as you have tax funding on it, I've got a problem. And that's happening with a number of legacy media outlets. But of course, the CBC is just the biggest and most bloated of them. I mean, the most vile of them. And it's not good. So either way, they've got all of these directors. Yeah, 143 directors, though. You know, I mean, it's a top-heavy, again, speaking of, like I was talking with Franco, private market versus government. You know, government can't do anything efficiently. They never can. No government can. And that includes broadcast. These guys, for value for dollar we're getting out of that trash network, I mean, they had their place. They did. You know, way back when you needed transmitters built across the country, and I'm talking like a century ago, when you're getting radio to reach people and communicate, it was hard for that infrastructure for a private market to effectively fill it or have the resources to share news, overseas news, things like that. And all the way up into I'd say even the 90s. I mean, the CBC was putting out some fantastic content when it came to exposés, documentaries. There was even good news content when I used to work surveying in isolated areas, and CBC radio would be the only thing you could pick up. Those days are gone, though, on two fronts. I mean, for one, we just don't need it. Every house I worked at, even as far as literally tuck to yuck tuck, has a satellite dish on top of it. They're not watching CBC, guys. That's the other part. And the content from the CBC is pure crap now. I mean, it's really rare to find decent content from the state broadcaster any longer. They used to have some of the best journalists on earth and some fantastic work that they would do, even if it was leftward leaning. But now what have they got? It's just woke junk, and we still have to pay for it. Okay, so Daniel Jardine saying, what the F is the Western Standard doing? Thousands have already voted in the Conservative leadership. Why would you pull this nonsense of having another debate and in doing so throwing Poilievre under the bus and promoting Charest as some kind of savior? Really effing stupid. Well, Daniel, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. We aren't holding another debate. That's the party that does that, not us. So, I mean, if you've got an issue with that, call the party. Take it up with them. I know that one of our columnists, David Creighton, was critical of Poilievre's response to it, but that's a columnist puts out their point of view and puts it doesn't necessarily represent the Western Standard itself. And that's how Mr. Creighton feels about it. And he's not throwing anybody under a bus, I believe. Either way, I'm sorry, but if you're confusing things, we don't have anything to do with that debate. That's the Conservative Party of Canada holding that debate. So, I mean, we just report on it at this point. So there's a bit of confusion on what's happening. Just so you know that we are going to be holding a UCP leadership debate fairly soon. So if you feel we're doing that wrong, by all means, give us crap. That'll be our responsibility. And if we do it poorly, I'm certain a lot of you guys will hold us to account pretty quickly on it. You don't hesitate to do so, but that's fine. It's fair enough. That's why I like the comment scroll. Hey, if I screw up, or if you think I screwed up, hey, you guys won't hesitate to let me know. Oh, you should see some of the emails I get sometimes. But, that's my job, is getting out there and getting on people's case when they screw up too. So let's just keep the conversation going. Let's see. We're talking about electric cars before. We still got a little bit, and we'll get to our guest pretty soon. This is a story. Buyers in 3 cities account for most of the new electric car sales nationwide. This isn't all that shocking, right? This is Stats Canada figures. So the electric cars is sparse outside of Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal. Well, again, of course it is, because they're not practical for people. They're a novelty. I mean, they are for people who want a virtue signal and commute when you live in a house where you can afford to upgrade to put a charging station into it, and you'll drive to an indoor parking space somewhere downtown daily, and drive home. If you're looking to go cross country, if you're somebody of modest income who can't spend $70,000 to $100,000 for a car, you aren't doing it. And I mean, yeah. So a load of these were and look at this, in all of British Columbia, though, new electric vehicles registered. All of that province, the most woke province in Canada, we've got 6,688 new ones registered. And that's the head of the country. And of course, of them, pretty much all of them were in Vancouver. I mean, they're useless in rural areas. They're not good for anything. And again, if you let the consumers choose, fine. The problem is they don't want to let us choose. They're constantly, pushing it on us. It's funny watching the auto manufacturers bending to the woke. They could look at the oil and gas companies and see how good it is to pander to these activists and constantly change your business plans for their models. I mean, Alberta's energy sector has bent over backwards, and I mean bent over in a number of ways. Oh, we're doing this to reduce emissions, and we're doing that, and we're doing this, and we're doing that. And you know what credit they got for it? None. The government's still kicking them in the balls. Guys, you can't appease the ideologues with the government. And these auto manufacturers who are turning over saying, yeah, we're going to switch to all electric soon. You better talk to the consumers rather than the government, because you're screwing yourself. You really are. Look at these numbers. We've had 10 years. We've had billions of dollars subsidizing electric vehicles, and they still remain a tiny, tiny little fraction of the vehicles on the road. It's not picking up. Let's see. You know how many new ones went to Prince Edward Island? 44. Yeah, I'm not missing a zero. 44. That's how many electric cars we got in Prince Edward Island. Saskatchewan, 130. Out of what? 1 million vehicles? Guys, this is not taking off. It's not getting there. 156 in New Brunswick, 201 in Manitoba. It's a luxury item, as I said, in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver. And hey, maybe the time will come, by all means. And if it does, I mean, if the time came and they said, here's an electric vehicle that comes in under $40,000, that I won't have to spend $10,000 to upgrade my home to charge, that has regular charging stations that I can stop at, that will charge it quickly, that doesn't lose most of its power in cold weather, that maintains its value, that batteries won't wear out on or catch on fire, I'll consider buying one. But you guys have got a number of things to fix first, don't you? Think about doing a cross-Canada road trip with your kids, eh? How great would that be with an electric vehicle? You're good for 4 or 5 hours, and you got to pull over and either pay a big premium for speed charging if it's possible. That's what, 20 minutes, half an hour more. The long charges take hours. This is not feasible. Your kids, meanwhile, are screaming, jumping up and down. Now think of these filling stations that we don't even have yet. What is going to happen to them? Because again, it's not like going to a gas station where you can turn over a large number of vehicles. You go to a truck stop, you go to a large gas station, you see the cars come and go. They can fill up in 5 minutes, move, go on to the next vehicle, and you turn them over. Even fast charging at 20 minutes a vehicle, can you imagine the backup? A gas station is going to have a couple hundred plug-ins in order to maintain the charges needed on the highway servicing ones to keep up. It's not reasonable. It's not there. The numbers aren't there. But it isn't stopping the lunatics in our federal government. It's not stopping them from pressuring and trying to stop all conventional car sales. And this is going to backfire on us, guys. This is going to backfire hard. I would say, again, get your combustion engine as fast as you can and take good care of it, because if one thing's going to increase in value, it's going to be those when these quislings within the auto industry start shutting down their conventional vehicle production for electric vehicles that nobody can afford and nobody wants. And suddenly these gas vehicles, the few that you can get, are going to be worth a very, very pretty premium. But all right, it's enough on that crap. Let's get on to Mr. Makichuk. I'm sure he'll have some light stuff to cover and talk about. There's our Western Standard columnist. Like I said, last time I spoke to him, he was sucking on a cigar and a drink out in Paris, and now he's back in Cowtown. How's it going, Dave?
Very good, Cory. Very good. Thanks for having me on. Thank you. And I've got my Red Wing shirt on because basically we were, even though the odds aren't great, we're holding hope that Stevie Eiserman might just look at Mr. Kachuk for a possible trade.
Well, that would be an interesting trade. Yeah. Calgary's team is gonna be looking pretty different this season. And here you are out inflaming them and rubbing the salt into the wound. So I'm certain our viewers and listeners will appreciate that, Dave.
Well, hey, I feel bad for the Flame fans. I really do. I mean, to lose two good players like that is terrible. It's just awful. I wouldn't wish that on the Flames for sure. But if the Wings can snag this guy, I wouldn't mind that at all. But it looks like he probably will go to someone else. So anyway,
well, that's the nature of the sport. And,
right. It's all about money. Actually, it's about money, right? So
yeah, the players don't like that term for it, but in reality, they're commodities, and those get traded, and
exactly.
you end up where you will.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about travel, though. I mean, you've done some recently. Your most recent column was talking about how we've gone from the golden era of air travel to today's hell on earth on the airlines.
Oh, God, yes. I mean, I remember I never got to fly on Ward Air, but everybody I talked to who flew Ward Air said it was the best airline in the world. It was just one big party. The food was great. The people were great. It was all about having fun and enjoying your trip to Europe. I remember my brother and his young bride went to Europe, and they said it was just the best airline ever. I have a friend who told me he flew the Canadian Pacific. Actually, he flew Canadian Pacific in a DC-6 in the late 1950s, and he said it was amazing. But Ward Air was absolutely one of the best. And if you fast forward to today, my God, the terrible things that Canadian passengers have had to deal with because of the airlines not really being ready for the post-COVID travel rush, and not having enough security personnel to look, check and make sure everything's safe. And then plus you have this Arrive Can thing, which I had to fill that thing out. It took me about 25 minutes in my hotel to figure this Arrive Canada and fill it all out. I guess once you filled it all out, it's a lot easier if you fly again. But and plus all the restrictions with the masks and everything, and also the airlines are packing these planes with seat patterns which are just, we're talking like something out of Con Air with Nicolas Cage, for God's sake. Yeah, you've got literally none, no legroom, none, zero. And this was on the Dreamliner, supposed to be a Dreamliner. And it was just absolutely horrible. And in my column, I say, if not for this wonderful flight attendant who saw me suffering and said, look, when you book back to Calgary, book between seats rows 10 through 14, and there's about that much more legroom. And it was much more survivable and a much better trip on the way back. But it's just really sad how bad the situation, how stupid it's gotten with so many things. And now they want to bring back the random testing, which is completely unnecessary. So it's awful. It's just, we've come so far, but we've actually come so little. It's just about packing those planes with people, and no wonder people are losing their tempers. No wonder they are, Well,
maybe it's one of the areas where the Soviets were actually ahead of their time. A flight I remember going way back into the late 80s, and I came off of Finnair in Helsinki, flying to there, which was fantastic overseas flight, great service. Of course, some very statuesque Finnish flight attendants.
Doesn't hurt.
Got onto Aeroflot to fly to Moscow from Helsinki. And boy, that was no frills. And that was the first time I kind of experienced that in my life. I mean, they just packed you onto that plane. The carpet was kind of loose even walking up the aisle, because they did actually tell you as part of their trivia, yes, we could take all the seats out of this and turn it into a troop carrier in 5 minutes. And your seat was wiggling, and they took off like a rocket straight into the air and then dropped straight down into Moscow in a way like, again, I think these were military pilots rather than, our domestic ones.
Right, right.
But that was quite a contrast. from the luxury. But nowadays, aside from perhaps those steep takeoffs, our conventional airlines aren't much different anymore.
Well, and as I mentioned in the column, a good friend of mine who travels a lot. I mean, he travels more than any person I know. And he was on an Air Canada business flight, and a flight attendant was trying to fit another bag into the overhead. And this is in business class, which is an expensive ticket. Like, we're talking big bucks. I've never flown that. It's expensive. And she took out his laptop and was pounding it to get it back. And he freaked out because all his business, all his work, which, by the way, is classified, was being pounded into the overhead. And he just said, well, I can't allow this to happen. So he took it out of her hands, and she freaked out. And you're threatening me, and I'm going to the captain. I'm going to get you tossed from the flight. And so the captain comes out, and my buddy's like, talking very polite, and said, look, this is what happened. And I'm sorry it happened, but really I was just afraid she was going to bust my laptop. And the captain just shook his head and, okay, fine, walked away. And the flight attendant was absolutely steaming mad. But, it just takes a little bit of common sense these days to calm down a little bit and treat passengers like passengers, not like prisoners. And they're just packing us in like sardines, and they don't give a damn anymore. They don't care. It's all about the bottom line.
To be a little fair, I think some of this was consumer driven too, though. I mean, the days of Ward Air and that, you paid a lot of money to fly. I mean, flying was an experience. You dressed up for it. You didn't go out in a t-shirt and sweatpants to get on the plane. And people didn't casually take an air trip unless they were a specialized business or something. This was something you did once every few years, perhaps. And now people kind of take it for granted and say, well, I want to be able to book it for only a few $100, get across the country. Well, they're going to cut some services if you want to get that. Like, I think the airlines kind of filled a bit of a need or a demand from the consumers as well. It's just that it led to such a rough experience.
Well, that's the thing. And back then it was a special thing. You put on a suit, you'd keep your ticket as a souvenir. Everything was special. You were treated specially all the way along. And I remember as a kid, back in Windsor, my dad and I we would drive to the airport to watch a CP Air DC-8 come in and land at our airport because it was coming in from Scotland, and it would be going to an exotic location like Lima, Peru, or somewhere like that. And it was a big thing just to see it, a big CP Air Empress DC-8. I mean, I'm a big aviation fan, but you're right, it was a big deal. Now it's changed, and there are so many costs associated for these airlines. And I mean, I don't mean to pick on the airlines. I just think that maybe they should get more help from the government too. I mean, my God, it's a disaster, and the government could be. And the thing that I hate is that they're telling us what a great job they're doing. And they're not doing a great job. They're making things harder for Canadians to travel. And some of that's landing on the airlines, which is not their fault. It's not their fault, because COVID hit and they had to let people go, and now they're trying to bring them back. And maybe the federal government should have foreseen this a little bit, better. The transport minister and the government and could have done more to make things a little better for Canadians, instead of telling us what a great job they're doing, which is total nonsense.
Well, that's it. And the government helping them out, I mean, it doesn't have to mean giving money to the airports or anything like that. A lot of it, like so many other things, just means getting out of the way. We've got a lot of ridiculous restrictions, testing, the arrive can, all these things. I mean, these border or these airport staff are already overloaded. You've got to check for this, you got to check for this. And now you've got this other stuff thrown on your plate on top of it. They can only keep up with so much, and a thankless job.
And one thing I wanted to mention was Charles de Gaulle Airport was really organized. Like, I thought, oh my God, what am I going to experience? And there were no people sleeping on the floor. There was a couple long lines, but everything was organized, and not only that, they were friendly, and they would help you through and say, well, where are you going? Oh, okay, fine. Have a nice trip. I was shocked. I'm not used to that. And these are the French, for God's sake. And I got to the WestJet line, and there was nobody there, me. And they said, yeah, go ahead, go get your, go to the front, get your ticket. And there was a couple after me who had no idea what ArriveCAN was. And the lady was trying to explain to them, well, you've got to do this ArriveCAN thing. You have to do that. And they had no idea what that was. So I can see where that would be a problem. But the only problem I had was through security in Charles de Gaulle. We got, when your bags go through the scanner, they have two ways to go: the easy way or the way which have to be checked separately. And one of my bags went separate. So I had to wait a long time, about a half an hour before they got to my bag. And the reason why is because the fellow ahead of me had 4 bottles of scotch, and each bag was wrapped in plastic from a duty-free shop, totally legal, everything fine. They unwrapped every bottle of scotch, took it out, put it in a machine to scan it, every single one by one by one. And there's people behind me waiting and waiting and waiting. I would say half an hour to 45 minutes, all because, they're checking things. I don't really think they need to, but who knows? And then they had to rewrap the scotch and put it back in sealed bags. I'm thinking, well, I mean, if we're afraid of bottles of scotch, I don't know. I mean, how far must we go? But unless they know something we don't about this, then okay, fine. But and I think things like that are going to happen. Wherever you go, wherever you travel, it's going to be an ordeal. You're going to be waiting in lines, all kinds of lines, and travel is just not as fun as it used to be, where you just got on the plane and went.
Yeah. Tyler,
going through a gauntlet, a veritable gauntlet wherever you go. This is our world today.
Yeah, and one of our commenters, Tyler Volstad, saying, yeah, flying's gotten worse since 9/11. I mean, the problem is, too, there's just so many people trying to blow us up. Unfortunately, they got to try and think of every eventuality to block it, and there's just no fast way to do that. So we'll kind of pivot, though. Nobby was telling me you got another story in the cooker for the weekend. What are you working on now, or what's about to come out?
Yes, I do. Well, I did a couple of pieces there. I just want to mention, I did a piece on Gerald Bull, who was an artillery genius, and the U.S. Army is actually utilizing his base bleed artillery technology. Base bleed is a gas that comes out of the back of the shell, which lowers the turbulence and makes it go longer and farther. But the Gerald Bull story is absolutely fascinating. He came up with an artillery gun. It's called the GC-45, GC gun Canada, 45 millimeter. And that gun to this day is still probably one of the most powerful guns, launching, a shell for great distances. He came up with all this, and then he was assassinated after working with the Iraqis on the super gun, and the Mossad is suspected of killing him, but we don't really know for sure. But anyway, that's a really fascinating story. Also, I did a piece on the Valkyrie aircraft, which is a drone that is going to be for the Air Force, which could very well be the loyal wingman following aircraft in the U.S. Air Force. And that is an amazing technology. That is really, really amazing. And it's much, much lower cost than putting a pilot in an aircraft. These things cost about $2 million a piece, as opposed to 80 or 90 million for an F-35. and millions more to train a pilot and 5 years to train a pilot. This thing eventually will probably get more it has a brain, and it has an artificial intelligence keeps expanding. So that's an interesting article too, if you want to have a look. And as for the weekend, there is a story which I thought was very interesting about a Marine Corps sniper. And this is a very unusual story. He's the greatest sniper in the Marines that ever existed in Vietnam. And his story is just absolutely amazing. It just takes, I guess it takes a different kind of dude to be that kind of person. But it's just a fascinating story. It's not a new story, but it's kicked around for a bit. But I just thought that the Western Standard readers might be interested in it. And also, just FYI, Canada holds the record for the longest sniper killing in Iraq. I believe it was in Iraq. So we actually hold the record for that. And it's an incredible distance. I can't remember how many yards. But anyway, this is just part of war, and it's an interesting story, and I hope readers like it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It looks like for whatever reason, our connection's acting up over here again, so I'm coming in a little rough. But for those who can hear me as I'm going, yeah, it's you cover a lot of those technology and military items, and it's interest.
Yes, the technology is incredible. The drone technology is taking off. It's the drones are it's evolving. Well, basically, Cory, Ukraine. Everybody in the world is watching what's going on in Ukraine. The Russians are watching and learning. The Ukrainians are watching and learning. The Americans are watching and learning. And the Chinese are watching and learning. And the rest of the world is watching and learning. And the power of these drones to kill, the Americans have given hundreds of drones to Ukraine, hundreds, including some top secret ones. There's one called the Phoenix Ghost, which has never even been used in battle until Ukraine. And what they're seeing is these things are very powerful, and drones are the future, and artificial intelligence in drones as well. And these things are just so dangerous. And imagine if you're a country, anywhere in the world, in South America, in anywhere, and you're watching what's going on in Ukraine, you are now a customer. And those companies that are going to be selling drones, especially advanced drones, are going to make a lot of money, because that's where it's going. That's where it's going. It's evolving and it's changing. And now you can put any type of warhead on a drone. And these companies are making it easier and easier for customers to customize their drone. I mean, it's like a Denny's menu. I'll have one of these, and one of these. That's how simplifying that they're making it, and that's where it's going. Anyway, I just wanted to mention that with the drone situation, it's just going crazy. The technology is rapidly expanding, and it's changed everything. It has changed everything.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff. You know, even though it's military, I mean, the stuff, some of those developments at least eventually will evolve into things that are, not necessarily developed to kill each other, which is a better development in the long run. So, okay, well, I'm going to let you go and get ready for the weekend. So thanks for joining us today, Dave, okay. And all the stuff you keep writing. And yeah, we're looking forward to that story about that sniper. It sounds fascinating, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, Cory, thanks a lot for having me. Thanks. And go Wings. Go Wings.
Yeah, you bet. All right. Thanks, Dave. That was Western Standard columnist Dave Makichuk. And thank you for enduring. I'm glad Dave filled the void there, because my own connection, I don't know what's going on in our office at the studio today, but it is just coming and going, and it's maddening. So it seems to be good now. And I want to check in. We're going across the pond to Phil Dave with Talk TV. And he's in the UK, because as we've been seeing in a lot of the news lately, that they're suffering under an exceptional heat wave out there. I think it's calmed down a little bit, but there's been a lot of fire and damage, and just an emergency that they weren't ready for. So I appreciate getting a view from there. Hello, Mr. Dave. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, Cory, please call me Phil, sir. But thank you very much. Yes, very good afternoon to you and good evening from the UK.
Yes, as those time changes, I'm glad you could make it in. I know it's Mel's been working hard to coordinate to get you to come in, and I guess we all are tightly connected to our country across the sea. We're all Commonwealth. We have a lot of family and friends over there, and we're just not used to seeing this sort of thing. Are things starting to stabilize and recover over there now?
Oh, thank heavens. I mean, it's the usual mugginess that one would expect to experience in a British summertime. That's about what we've got at the moment. I think the last time I checked the temperature today, it was in the early 20s, so that's much more bearable. To give you some sense of context, what the London Fire Brigade have experienced over the last couple of days, when we were experiencing temperatures in the late 30s and even the early 40s in the UK, which is just unprecedented. Never heard of that before. The Fire Brigade said that they had their busiest day, get this, since World War II. So that is how bad the situation actually became, because obviously the heat meant there were so many fires all over the place. The emergency services just couldn't cope.
Well, and people have to bear in mind, I mean, temperatures that might be okay in one area can be a crisis somewhere else. I mean, you're used to moderate temperatures. It's just like in Texas, their world comes to a halt if they get an inch of snow, but 40-degree weather and they don't bat an eye. And likewise, in cooler or more moderate climates, when you get a heat wave like that, we're just not ready to cope with it.
But I think that's the thing, exactly the same way that over in Canada, I know that you guys are fantastic when it comes to dealing with, say, a lot of snow. Whereas over here, okay, we can deal with a bit of it, but not too much. But it seems to be extremes of any weather we can't cope with here. And the main reason for that is because extremes on all fronts, whether it's extreme heat, extreme snow, extreme rain, whatever it is such a rarity that we don't have the equipment standing by to deal with this kind of extreme weather. So take, for example, the extreme heat recently. I know a lot of buildings across the pond and in certain parts of the Middle East would, as standard, have air conditioning fitted within that building to deal with this kind of weather. Whereas here, air conditioning is just something for people of a luxury, that it's not really standard in most buildings here. Certainly houses don't really have air conditioning. Okay, most modern office buildings do, but certainly not old ones. And it's because we just don't need it normally.
Yeah, and it's similar here. A lot of us can just get by. We'll get a few hot days a year where you'll open the windows and turn on the fans, but we can get by without air conditioning. But you get those protracted heat waves, and for, I guess, vulnerable people like seniors and people with respiratory issues, it can be very dangerous to be exposed to heat for such long periods. Is there been somewhere where people could retreat to, at least when it was that hot, or somewhere to get out of the house, things like that?
Not really. This is the problem. And especially that was actually one of the warnings that came with this extreme weather, is that we were being told by professionals and by our leaders and things like that, that they wanted to make sure that those who are older, those who maybe do have respiratory issues, making sure they were protecting themselves and made sure that they took the proper precautions. So making sure they had plenty of air circulating. If they had any fans they could access, then that'd be great. Also make sure that they maybe drank plenty of water all the time. All of the standard advice that you would expect to receive in extreme conditions. I think, though, Cory, my favorite bit of advice, though, that we received over the past few days from the officials, and I don't think I would have thought of this without the guidance of the powers that be, is they said, under no circumstances should anyone be tempted to wear, quote unquote, a woolly hat. Thanks. I don't think I would have thought of that myself.
Well,
Thank you very
much. I'm glad
much.
they offered that advice to everybody. Yeah, we have those over here too.
Honestly.
With the fires, I mean, one of our commenters, Bridget Frostad, saying, and like, what did spark the fires, though? I mean, the heat can exacerbate it, but why were so many fires lit? Like, what had happened to cause them in the first place?
It's a great question. I don't think we know all the answers, to be honest. I think some of the worst damage we saw was actually in the East End of London, where there was a cluster of houses. The buildings over here, typical houses are terrace houses, so all in a row, all joined to each other. And there was, I think, a chain of about 5 houses in the East End of London that caught ablaze. And although it's not completely clear what it is, it could have been a patch of dry grass that maybe spread to the building. It could have even been a cigarette butt from someone sort of just not extinguishing it properly. And of course, in the heat, it caught fire. But I've heard horror stories of people leaving items on windowsills that they don't think will actually magnify or intensify the heat. Silly things like, for example, those snow globe things. So I've heard like sort of stories of some people leaving a snow globe on the windowsill, not actually appreciating how the sun can magnify through a glass sphere like that, and that catching a light. So it's all stuff like that. It's just that we've never experienced before. So causes are still, I think, being decided in a lot of the cases where, sadly, people's homes did catch fire. But as a result of it now, I think the most important thing to remember or to note at this stage is we haven't heard of any loss of life, thank goodness. And that's the most important thing. Now, that may be just because those statistics haven't come out yet. But most importantly is that it would appear as though that we haven't experienced that so far.
So how about with your power grid and your load? Because I do know that it takes a heck of a lot more energy actually to cool down an environment than to heat it. And in areas with heat waves, quite often you can suddenly get blackouts and brownouts. That kind of happens in Canada occasionally too. With the people who do have air conditioning, they blast it up full blast and it overwhelms the grid sometimes. Did it hold out there?
As far as I know, yes, it did, which is terrific. I don't actually think that was too much of a problem because, to tell you the truth, with the rising cost of energy over here, I don't know what it's like over in Canada, but with the rising cost of energy over here, I strongly suspect that people were too afraid to, and I'm genuinely serious when I say too afraid, to use their electricity, because the problem is that energy bills are they're just flat out extortion now, so horrendously expensive over here that a lot of people are actually choosing not to even bother really using that much electricity. So I wouldn't be surprised if that swayed an awful lot of people's decision on how they were going to keep cool in the heat. And I strongly suspect that they probably just didn't even bother half people turning on the fans and stuff like that.
Yeah, our power is not a heck of a lot cheaper over here, if at all, as well. So it makes people reconsider some of their decisions. But sometimes, as I said, if you're vulnerable, you're a senior, something like that, you might not have a choice.
Oh, sure.
A safety
issue. Sure. No. I very much hope that people made the sensible decision and thought to themselves, well, look, even if you do spend a bit more money on 1 or 2 days of extreme heat, make up for it elsewhere. And hopefully that's exactly what they did. And I hope very much that people who were in that position did stay safe. But as I say, I mean, it's all about sort of waiting for these statistics to come out over the coming days. As it stands, we're talking about the start of this week, Monday and Tuesday of this very week that we're talking about. And so at the end of the week, it's still a bit early days to know for sure all of the statistics involved with the heat. But what we do know is that the UK actually broke its own record and topped the 40 degrees Celsius mark, which we haven't done before.
Yeah. So, before I let you go, then, how's your forecast looking? It's cooled down a bit for the moment. Is it looking like it should stay stable for the next while?
Thank heavens. It looks like we're going back to good old Blighty again, and we can expect some rain in the coming days. So we'll be much happier, I'm sure.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming in to check in with us, and just get a direct account of how it's going over there. And like I said, we're in some of a moderate climate here too, so we can relate when heat knocks us down more than it does with others, and that it can become a pretty dangerous situation. So I'm glad it sounds like there's been no casualties so far, and hopefully more policies and infrastructure come into place so you're not so vulnerable for future heat waves.
Absolutely. Well, here is hoping. And I think that sort of one thing that we are all aware of is that these freak occurrences may happen a little more often. As to what the cause of that is, that's a great subject of discussion over here. A lot of people obviously attributing it towards climate change. A lot of people just saying, hey, it's just the summertime, chill out. What's the problem? So that in itself is causing great debate. But let's just say that I think that whatever the reason behind it is, I think we can all agree that we need to be better prepared for certainly extreme heat. But as I said, unfortunately, preparations for extreme weather of any sorts in the UK has never necessarily been our strong point.
Oh, and as you said, yeah, the discussion as to the causes is a heated one, and it is over here for those things too. And I can see it in my comment scroll, but that's a whole other show that we could fill a heck of a lot more time on. So
anytime.
Great. I appreciate the update. And yeah, maybe perhaps we could check in with you again down the road on UK issues, because it's always good to get direct information from somebody out there on the ground.
It would be a great pleasure, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I will talk to you again sometime.
Thank you, Cory.
Great. So that was Phil Dave from Talk TV over in the UK. And as I said, I'd like to get a direct voice on, just what's happened. And we do get some, news out here where they like to play up on the hysterics or exaggerate things. But at the same time, it is a real concern. It's, as I've said, that those differences, it depends on what you're used to. And here in Canada, we don't take the heat waves as well as they would in Texas or New Mexico. And likewise, Texas grinds to a halt when they get a bit of snow or sub-zero temperatures. As others are pointing out, yes, it's just a few days of sun. I'm not going into saying it's a big climate change thing, or even if it is, you see, the thing is, we got to adapt, learn from it, set up your systems to better deal with it, and move on. I mean, we can't change the weather. It's funny. I put a tweet out and I got a bunch of people because, what about cloud seeding, this and that? Yeah. I know there's little things we could do to modify immediate weather terms, but there's nothing we can do to stop a heat wave or cause a heat wave. I mean, aside from a nuke, maybe. And with these things, they happen, as others were pointing out and giving some numbers. There's been similar heat waves in years gone by, and they can cause a lot of problems, though. And it's worth watching. I'm not gonna. We shouldn't be pushing the panic button. We should just be adapting. We should look for it and realize there's going to be some heat waves, and we're going to deal with hot times at times. But it really did put them under a lot of pressure. There was a lot of fires, and again, when you don't have air conditioning, and you got some people who have illnesses, things like that, it can be pretty dangerous overheating and getting that hot. So I appreciated Mr. Dave coming on and Melanie for hooking me up with him there to talk about that and see what's happening. And hopefully it remains with no casualties and they can learn from it. I see a commenter, Al McKill, I guess that's what Dave Makichuk was talking about with that sniper shot. And he says, yeah, the Canadian sniper longest shot was in 2017 with a 3,540 meter shot during the Iraqi Civil War. I imagine that must have been like one of those 50 cal sniper rifles just to have even a range like that. And what an unimaginable hit. I mean, that's over 2 miles away. To put that into a non-metric perspective, I mean, that's an incredible shot, it was something else. So, and again, with Makichuk covering those things, as I said, it was hard to talk with him because I appreciate him talking on and on. Some people were saying, okay, well, Dave's going, yeah, but Dave's filling the void because my internet connection went to crap there for a while. So, oh no, Sylvia saying, you ever seen the trails in the sky, Cory? Oh, look, I'm not going to start on the contrail thing, guys. There's other sites where they'll entertain that one a little more than I will. And you're welcome to believe that the government's got secret chemicals going from commercial jetliners and changing our weather, but I'm not among that camp. So, I'll have to see a little better evidence. But either way, we got the weather that we are dealing with it. Let's see, look at a couple more news items as we wrap up the week here. The government's pondering ocean mining. This one's interesting, and I think it's got a whole bunch of potential, but I bet you the government will not act on it. They will... I'm sorry, I just can't help myself with the comment scroll. Yes, Lori, no, it's not a secret. I know the contrails are around. They're controlling our minds, and it's all out there in the open. The baggage handlers are in on it, and the pilots are in on it, and the airlines are in on it, and the government's in on it, and the doctors are in on it. And my dog Rex is in on it. It's all in the open. They're controlling us with contrails from the planes. Okay, that's done. So ocean mining, though, this is something that really might happen. And seabed, I mean, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of metals, a lot of chemicals, things we could get. But unfortunately, it's purely theoretical, and the department is saying, well, nobody's really actually applying. So, I mean, I guess it's a theoretical discussion. But it is an area where with technology, we could do a lot more. I just don't have faith with our bureaucratic, ideological, lunatic government that they would ever approve anything like that because... oh my God, you're going to squash a minnow. We can't approve the project. It's done. But thanks for spending $20 million to study it and try and tell us what we can do with the ocean there. But they are looking into it. It's interesting. I'll back up a little bit too. I'm going to talk a bit about Pierre Poilievre. That came up. Somebody with the commenters was talking about that as well. So as Dave mentioned at the start of the show, the party has scheduled another debate. And when the party schedules a debate, they make it mandatory for the candidates. They say, you have to attend it or we'll fine you. And there's some party internal goings on obviously happening here right now. And Poilievre is obviously not happy with the party. The releases from him and some of his radio show interviews and some of the people working on his campaign are furious with this and basically telling the party to get stuffed. Poilievre was kind of accusing them almost of just trying to get a platform for charade because he isn't getting one elsewhere. I don't know. It's mixed. I can understand and I don't like. It's a mixed thing. I can understand why front runners don't like attending debates and forums and town hall meetings, or at least perceived front runners. It's assumed he's in the front. Most people, I think, acknowledge that. Because you go to these events, you almost never meet any undecideds, especially this late in the campaign. Not going to find them. Most people have already made up their mind. And one thing that can happen, though, is you're going to sit there as the perceived front runner and you're going to get the crap beat on you, out of you from every other candidate, because you will be the focus of all of their attacks. And you won't gain any ground, but there's always a potential you could lose your temper, or the opponent could just say something brilliant or whatever, and you can lose ground. You can definitely, there's always room to lose, and there's not much room to win. And that's why they don't do it very often. You see that in localized races too, whether it's on a provincial level or a federal level. It's sometimes really hard to get the incumbent out to show up at some of those town hall meetings and forums and debates that go on during elections, because they just don't want to rock it. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. That's the opportunity when voters should be able to listen to you, as many opportunities as humanly possible. I just understand the strategy behind why they don't do it. Like when I ran for the Libertarian Party federally, I ran once for that. I was under no illusion I'm going to win a seat in Alberta with the Libertarian Party, but I wanted to get a few points out there, and I wanted to ask the Conservative, incumbent questions on issues that he wouldn't otherwise have had to answer. So the opportunity I had for that was at two of the debate forums that were held, and I wanted to ask about supply management, and I did, and I forced him to make answers on that. So it was on the record. I mean, did it change the world? Not necessarily, but those forums give that opportunity for people to hear things that they wouldn't otherwise. And debates, same thing. And again, Polyev is saying, that the debates already were a joke. I mean, the shots are really getting hard and heavy, pointing out the goofy, sad trombone crap and everything that went on with the party debate that was held in Edmonton. So again, you can see why he doesn't want to go, but I'm not sure if I like that happening. That's all. It's a mixed thing. Either way, we'll see how that all irons out. Let's see. Independent MLA Thomas Dang, he's the one who tried hacking things. I love how the media reports on it. It says beleaguered MLA. He's an NDP MLA in Alberta. He got busted for hacking. He's been charged. And but the media reports it saying he admitted to testing the security of Alberta's vaccine information portal. Testing the security. Really? This is our media at work again. I can't even remember where I pulled this. I just give myself prompts for the show. Testing the security. That's like me going up and I got caught with a crowbar trying to break into a place. Oh, he was just testing the security. No, I was trying to break in, and Dang was trying to hack, or at least allegedly. So, I mean, say allegedly, but he wasn't testing the security. What a joke. You don't get arrested and have your house searched like that and charged for testing the security. But I guess we want to make it nice. So he's not going to run for the NDP in the next election. The scandal is just a bit too much for them. All right, I'm going to wrap it up and let you guys all get on with your weekend. Come in on Monday again. Of course, we'll be doing it again. And my guest that day will be Dan Makichuk. People might remember him. He's from, he speaks on the gas prices and energy issues all the time. He's a former Liberal member of Parliament from back when the Liberals were actually good. And he's very critical of the Trudeau government. He's certainly not like the Liberals of today. He's been on the show before. Always a good conversation, and we'll see if we can't round up another guest to go with him by then. So thanks for tuning in this week, guys. Lots of news, lots of stuff going on, and there will be plenty more. Oh, one more question. Tracy asking, when's the UCP vote? I believe it's in early October. When should I get my application as a member? That I don't know. Email the party. All right, thanks, guys. I'll see you all Monday morning, 11:30 sharp.